Hey there. Think back for a moment. Remember when you were small? I mean, I still am, just look at me. But think about when that shadow in the corner of your room seemed to move. When the short walk from your door to the bed felt like crossing an endless ocean of darkness. Little Nightmares doesn't just remind us of these childhood fears, it rebuilds them, brick by brick, shadow by shadow, until we're right there again. But before we dive deeper, I should warn you, this video contains spoilers for both Little Nightmares 1 and 2. So if you haven't experienced these games yet, you might want to hold off and come back later. Like, for real, go leave a comment promising to come back, or I will cry. What makes these games different is how they reconstruct childhood fear from the ground up through the use of scale, sound, and storytelling. Little Nightmares doesn't just show us a scary world, it makes us feel tiny and vulnerable within it. Everything towers over you. Doors require your entire body weight to open. Simple chairs become climbing challenges. But this isn't just about making you feel small, it's about recreating how a child actually experiences the world. Take the hospital in Little Nightmares 2. Playing as Mono, you and Six are forced to navigate through the seemingly endless maze of this building, all while you're being hunted by countless mangled wooden corpses. These mannequins, patients as the game calls them, writhe in pain on gurneys before breaking free from their constraints and crawling towards you with whatever limbs they have left. And just when you think you're safe, you're faced with the Doctor. His misshapen body, hidden behind curtains and illuminated by the light above an operating table, almost creates this Rorschach test where every ink blot gets you closer and closer to the same diagnosis as Frank Heffley. All of this transforms what should be a place of healing into a child's worst nightmare. Or really anybody's worst nightmare, let's be honest. Similarly, in the original game, the Ma's kitchen is equally overwhelming. The chefs aren't just tall, they're giants, with heavy breathing making your heart race almost as much as seeing them butcher tonight's dinner as you sneak by, knowing it could just as easily be you on the receiving end of every heavy thud of their cleaver. And I wasn't sure where else to put this in the script, but when we get to see the people of the Ma eating said dinner, it almost reminded me of the pigs in Spirited Away. I just get a very similar feeling in my chest watching both scenes play out for the very first time. I actually think there's inspiration drawn from Miyazaki's work in a lot of the horror games we all love, but I might just save that for another video. Let me know in the comments if that sounds like something you'd be interested in. But back to the game. You have the school teacher with her, suffice it to say, unnaturally long ramen noodle neck. And she's the perfect representation of that all-seeing authority figure that haunted our childhood. Do you remember how it felt when you thought teachers had eyes in the back of their heads? She can quite literally stretch herself across rooms and around corners to peer into any one of your hiding spots. And let's not forget how the camera angles contribute to this feeling of smallness. That side-scrolling perspective with its slightly fisheye lens makes everything more imposing. But when you're hiding, the camera pulls in tight, creating a momentary safe space that only emphasizes how dangerous everything else truly is, and makes things that much more terrifying when your safety is ripped away by one of the monsters. Sure, the perspective is the same, but you are never going to feel like that hallway fight scene in Oldboy. Scale alone doesn't create that pit-in-your-stomach fear, though. It's the use of sound that really turns your knuckles white. Neither Six nor Mono speaks a word, and this silence forces you to tune into every little noise around you. You know that feeling when you're home alone and suddenly hear a floorboard creak? That's exactly what these games tap into. The subtle groaning in the teacher's library becomes your early warning system, the distant static of a television to let you know that the Thin Man could be just around the corner. These background noises are now your lifeline in a world where you're always the prey. Think about hiding from the lady in the first game. Outside of cover, her genuinely haunting humming fills the space. But once she's hidden, the sound becomes muffled, although it never disappears. A constant reminder that your safety is temporary. Because if she's close enough for you to hear her, that means she can hear you just as well too. I remember playing this back in the day with a friend on a call and being genuinely scared to move across the rooms in this level. I also got stuck on one of the puzzles for way too long until he googled a walkthrough for me, but that's neither here nor there. Shout out to Ben, this video definitely wouldn't have happened without you. The music is also worth a special mention. Rather than typical horror stings, both games use discordant, almost childlike melodies that feel like corrupted lullabies. I'd say they were really well done, even if they were just static tracks, but you also have examples like the music box theme in Little Nightmares 2, which becomes increasingly warped as the game progresses. But what I love most about these games is their commitment to show rather than tell. There's no exposition dump, no convenient diary entries explaining everything. Instead, you piece together the story through observation and lived experience. The hunter's taxidermy-filled cabin tells you everything you need to know about him without a word. The portraits in the Pale City hint at society's decline. Even the way other characters react to Six suggests her nature long before it's revealed. This approach puts you in the same position as your character, learning in real time. Look closely at the toys throughout Little Nightmares 2, broken dolls with missing limbs, abandoned teddy bears with single-button eyes. Each suggests children who once played here, now absent. The empty playground with its swings moving gently in the wind, a world where childhood itself isn't even really corrupted. It's just gone. A lot of the thematic fear in these titles can be derived from the idea of a lost childhood. At its most basic level, the series operates by telling you the story of children experiencing things that no child would ever want to. So it kind of wears its heart on its sleeve. But I'd argue the scarier aspect to think about here isn't what's been lost, but what you might become as a result. At their core, both games tell stories of transformation, but not the kind we typically expect. Six and Mono each follow paths that lead them to become the very things they once feared. Six ultimately becomes the lady, and likewise Mono is transformed into the Thin Man. Six's transformation, in my opinion, was really centered on the story of a child who had absolutely no control and developed an unrelenting hunger for it, symbolized by her rumbling stomach. Speaking of hunger, let's talk about the sponsor. Wait, what's that? Oh, there's no sponsor today. Alright, well, let's carry on. Six has several acts of consumption throughout the story, from eating a rat all the way to eating the lady herself and absorbing her powers. It's after getting these powers that we see Six now has complete control of everything, and coincidentally, her stomach no longer rumbles. Mono's story is equally heartbreaking, filling the role of a child who simply needed someone to be there for him. His determination to save Six ultimately leads him to becoming the Thin Man, creating a time loop of suffering. Six letting Mono fall at the end of the second game as she escapes the signal tower completes this transformation for him. This abandonment crystallizes his fate. Without connection to anchor him, he slowly becomes the very entity he fought against. Time passes, resentment grows, and the Thin Man is born from the remains of a child who only wanted to help and be helped. What really stuck with me in these stories was the themes of cycles, reflecting how fear often works in our own lives. When we let fear control our actions, don't we risk becoming what once terrified us? Little Nightmares and its sequel achieve something rare in horror gaming. They make us feel like children again, but not in a warm, nostalgic way. They remind us of when we were small, vulnerable, and trying to make sense of a world that seemed far too big and far too scary. These games don't just show us horror, they make us live it through the eyes of a child. They remind us that sometimes the scariest stories aren't about supernatural monsters, but about the transformative power of fear itself. Switching off the console and returning to a now well-lit room, these games leave players with the scariest moment of all, trying to find an answer to this question. Would the child you once were be proud of who you are now? Or would they be afraid? Thank you for watching.